Then yeah, we can just get right into it then. Um, so yeah, just give us like a quick little rundown of who you are and what your transformation was during the last, I guess, 13 weeks.
12 weeks, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, I'm Nicole Chesney. I am a kindergarten teacher based in Northern Virginia, so total virtual client here. Um, and I was looking to commence a fat loss phase after coming off of a moderate bulking phase in the winter. I kind of wanted to trim down a little bit for summer. And after doing a 12-week program with Chris, I successfully lost 16 pounds, which is awesome. That's not the only um, measure of progress. I can see a lot more progress. I went down in like a jean size, clothes fit differently, the mindset as well. You just feel better. So as long as on top of the actual numerical progress, there was other modes of progress as well within those 12 weeks.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, we talked about those a bunch during like the entire process of the program. Is important not to just look at the progress markers in terms of just the number on the scale, but in terms of energy and I think at like the middle point in the program, there was a point where you were getting like a little more tired because of carb
Mm-hmm.
reduction, that sort of thing, and then we addressed that. So
Yeah.
despite all of that stuff, it's good to have other ways to measure progress.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
16
No.
pounds though, that's pretty legit.
Yeah, 16 pounds legit. It's one more than we anticipated for. And I remember originally starting the cut, I chose the level of cut that was moderate. So I was only expecting to lose about 10 pounds. But
Right.
after pushing through that midway point, I realized, you know what, this is actually feasible. I could probably push myself a little more, which is great because then I actually ended up losing the most amount of weight and the options provided, but I still did it within, a means that I felt was acceptable and totally like capable of doing.
Right. Yeah, we didn't go too intense or like completely
Mhm.
restrict foods or have you doing we just talked about this. We know you hate doing cardio excessively, so we didn't have to incorporate that either.
Right,
Um,
right.
yeah, so
Yeah.
I think that's a good segue into the next question I have, which is I know before we started you had done I think you had mentioned like apps in the past. Most of my clients have done other programs, whether it was like a PDF or they follow their favorite influence or something like that.
Hmm.
So I just was curious why you decided to stray away from, the pre-made stuff in an app or PDF or influence or whatever that was. Um,
Hmm.
and why you decided to hire a coach in the first place, and then what led to your success that you didn't necessarily get with some of the other things.
Yeah, so like most people, I have tried a lot of different online programs. I've tried many apps, I've tried many influencers, and all of them were great, but they just weren't producing the results that I was looking for in the time that I had allocated for them. I like to think of it as kind of a quality versus quantity aspect. All these apps, they're relatively cheap, but they're baseline. They're not personalized to as something as a coach would provide. Having a one-on-one coach to listen to you, to give you guidance, to help you through every step of the process. That personalized approach is way more feasible to me than a $20 app, a month that gives you the same thing every week. And that is clear to produce those results because of the results that I've had getting, 16 pounds down. I have not had a fitness app to do that at all yet. So it's really that personalized factor that was the lure to getting a one-on-one coach.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty common benefit, I think, to having a coach is just someone that you can bounce ideas off of,
Hmm.
right? Like during our weekly calls, you would sometimes there wouldn't be a ton to bring up, and sometimes you would be like, I just want to make sure that this is okay. Like I've been doing this, I think it's okay, but I just want to make sure. And
Hmm.
just having a coach to at least reassure you or kind of just very minorly like redirect you in a different direction, even if it's like very slight, I think is important because if you don't have that over the course of, 12 weeks, 16 weeks, however long you're planning on cutting, if you just
Mhm.
keep redirecting yourself, you kind of end up completely in a different location than you would have been. So I think just having some reassurance, yeah, I think is usually
Yeah.
a valuable aspect.
It's nice to have a real person behind a
Yeah.
screen, even though I do like, a virtual client, all that, the virtual program, it still is reassuring to say like, oh, you're my coach, you motivate me, it's personalized versus just the bland, baseline fitness influencer or app that's out there. But also the tips that you provide or the things like that, I need help with like alternate activities or exercises.
Mhm.
And some of these apps do have alternate exercises, but they're not the same like quality as you would provide because you know me, you know who I am, you know
Right.
how I know my body.
Right.
So that personalized factor is really the big key here for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I think like we just discussed, you're going on vacation soon. And so like some of those apps might have different workouts you can do, but I think as far as saying I need this in this specific situation, you don't have to worry about it. You don't have to like figure out what you're going to do during that week or before or after and getting back on track, all that sort of thing. So, yeah,
Yeah,
I
and it's
think
totally hands off too, because like in those apps, you have to go in and you have to be like, okay, I need to, alternate this and alternate
right,
this and oh, do this week or this week, but you do it all, on your end
right.
because you are in, communication with me. So
Yeah.
yeah, agree. Hmm.
Yeah, all you have to do is send a text or set up a call usually,
Hmm.
get it
Yeah.
figured out. So yeah, I have another question then. What before starting, I know we kind of briefly mentioned picking a few different intensity options, but what were your sort of initial expectations before starting the program? Or like what would you have been happy with? And then where did we land
Hmm.
as far as progress in relation to those goals that we set?
Yeah, so great question. I think before going on this cut, the term cut is kind of daunting at first. You're like, oh my God, this is
Mhm.
gonna suck. Like, I'm not gonna be eating anything. I'm gonna be doing so much cardio. I'm gonna be doing all the things I hate to do. I'm not gonna be lifting heavy, high reps and low weights and cardio and, not eating. So at first, I was honestly a little scared. I was like, I don't know if I'm gonna be able to do this. Like, I have to commit. I had to really talk myself into committing.
Mhm.
But then as the program progressed, I found how, dare I say, easy it was because of the knowledge that I gained from it is like, I don't have to restrict eating. I don't have to be doing so much cardio. I was doing cardio twice a week on top of still lifting weights, sometimes heavy, but
Mhm.
also incorporating that cardio aspect into weightlifting, which made it more feasible and more acceptable for me to do. But then, I was still eating well within the foods that I actually wanted to eat, just on smaller amounts. So I wasn't ever depriving my body of cravings, which I thought was going to be the biggest challenge going into a cut. But because I didn't have to do that, that's why I actually kind of enjoyed the cut and wanted to actually extend the cut because I was like, you know what, I can do this. This is actually something that my body is capable of doing. So I want to extend it even more. And that's why we ended up doing like almost a 13-week cut because I was like,
Mhm.
you know what, I can do this.
Yeah, it wasn't as bad as you
Right.
anticipated.
No, not as bad at all.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you make a good point in saying that just the vocabulary, like the word cut is like
Mhm.
suggests some major shift. And
Mhm.
we changed kind of how the workouts were, but that was also almost related to um just coming off another block where we had been doing the same thing for a while.
Right.
So the shift was kind of just to mix it up anyways. We probably would have changed workouts anyways.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, I think just if you have in your head that like this cut is going to be this big, daunting, scary change, and you start to like remove entire food groups or do
Mhm.
cardio every day, it's going to suck. But obviously, we don't have to do that considering you are down 16 pounds. And like you said, we were doing cardio twice a week. I think maybe at one point we had like a week or two where you did it three times. I can't remember
Yeah.
there.
That just the last 2 weeks because I really wanted to push myself.
Right,
We upped the cardio to 3 times a week, and then I was doing two a days for the last 2 weeks just because
right,
I had
right.
time. And I
Yeah.
was like, see if I can do it. And it's cool to know that I got over the mental hurdle of doing that.
Right. Yeah.
That was, yeah, something extra fun at the end of the cut that we kind of decided that we could do.
Right. Yeah, which kind of speaks to what you were saying in terms of you weren't mentally burnt out at the end of the program. You were actually willing to push a little bit harder,
Yeah.
because we didn't have to like go pedal to the metal immediately. We kind of just eased in,
Hmm.
and monitored the progress and still got to where we wanted to go. So that's good.
Yeah.
Um, so as far as it went pretty smoothly, but as far as any struggles you had,
Hmm.
um, there's usually like a contentious relationship with diet culture, kind of like we were just saying.
Hmm.
Could you talk about what you think your biggest struggle was losing the weight or leaning out as far as the diet aspect goes?
I think the biggest struggle for me with, being in the cut was trying to get the mindset of dieting once again. Because in college, I had an unhealthy relationship with food and calorie intake. I
Mhm.
was tracking throughout my entire college experience, and I was eating only like 800 calories a day for like a year, and I was very focused on how I looked and not necessarily how I felt. So I think the difference between back then and now, because this was the first time I was tracking food since that point in time,
Mhm.
was more about how I felt, looking for those other progress monitors, not necessarily the scale, but my energy levels, how my clothes were fitting, little changes that I saw in mirrors, like from progress pictures. I think those were more motivating in the end, and I valued them higher than just that number on the scale. But that being said, the number on the scale, because eventually, like, we did need a quantifiable progress like monitor. So when I saw that I was losing weight, when the scale was going down, that was the highest motivating factor in
Mhm.
continuing to keep up with, what I was doing. And I think, knowing, kind of talking about the diet culture, like back, like, in college, it was like I had like a smoothie in the morning, and then I had like a frozen meal at night. It was always a
Mhm.
frozen meal that was like 350 calories, that was like the simply life, like the natural life, whatever. Like, who knows how many preservatives are in
Mhm.
there. But the one difference between then and now is that I didn't have a single frozen meal, and that I was still cooking whole foods at home, or even going out and getting McDonald's every
Mhm.
now and then, but still being within my calorie range.
Yeah.
So, I was still able to eat the things that I enjoyed. I was still able to have a whole diet instead of going straight to like the frozen meals, the shakes, the smoothies, which I did incorporate smoothies and shakes. But on top of that, I also made sure that I was nourishing my body with tasty food, food that I wanted, food that I cooked at home.
Mhm.
Instead of, I feel like with this whole diet culture, it's like you have to do like the frozen meals, or like the powders and the drinks and all that, which yeah, the whole balanced diet that I like continued through this cut, I think that was something that was really eye-opening, because I realized, I was like, oh, this cut, like this diet, like I can just improve my overall diet. I don't have to make negative changes to get a temporary result. So it's like I can just kind of fix what I'm eating, so to speak, instead of just like dropping everything and having to go and like eat the stuff that I don't want to eat.
Right. Yeah, I think that all or nothing mentality that people have, again, tied to diet and cutting culture really limits people, and it just causes more harm than good. But having, like you talked about, having the objective measures like the weight on the scale, which I think we only weighed in once a week,
Hmm. Hmm.
or around there. It wasn't every day or any
Yeah.
amount that would
Hmm.
become obsessive.
No.
And that
Yeah.
was just kind of more or less to just kind of check in and have an
Right.
objective way to compare against your more subjective measures that you talked about before. Um,
Exactly.
and some of those mindset shifts, like being able to say, okay, it just takes a bit of planning to say, I know I'm going to be going out later, or I'm going to be going to this restaurant, or I'm going to be out all weekend. What can I
Hmm.
do like leading up to that? Or how can I sort of manipulate my diet the day of or the day before so that I can enjoy a cheeseburger from McDonald's, or I can
Right.
go out to dinner with, family and friends, that sort of thing.
Yeah,
Just those
I think that's
mindset shifts.
definitely, yeah, it's the mindset it's the mindset shift of understanding what the calories are being made up of.
Hmm.
So bartering with them and kind of manipulating, saying, okay, I know that I'm going out later with a few friends. I will probably end up going to McDonald's. So a cheeseburger is down the line. I know that's 300 calories, 22 grams of protein. So somewhere else, I have to kind of drop that 300 calories early in the day, which ended up being fine because I knew throughout the day, I was like, you know what? I still have that cheeseburger to look forward to. So I wasn't depriving myself of things that I, was going to have, or like when we go
Right.
to like parties or when we go out for drinks at a bar, like I would limit myself to just one drink, like one tequila soda that I knew was 90 calories or something that was, relatively within that realm of how many calories I had left. So it's really having a better newfound knowledge
Mhm.
of how many calories I'm allowed and what like a certain food, how many calories those like are in there. So
Right.
I think like realizing like a caloric like intake, I think that has really helped me in this cut. Like I've really learned a lot more about how many calories are in certain things.
Hmm.
And kind of like, it's like, do I want like a handful of chips or do I want like, three watermelon slices and two peaches, right? Because they're the
Right.
same calories. And some days I'd go for the dang chips because I
Yeah.
wanted them, right? And that's
Mhm.
fine because it still was just that numerical amount.
Right.
And other days I'd like I'll go for the watermelon and peach, So it's just trying to figure out and bartering those calories. And then that way you're not depriving your body of the cravings that it has, and then you're not going astray during your cut. So
Right. Yeah, I think it's more one-dimensional than it is on paper because like you can have a whole diet planned out and obviously you will make incredible progress if you just eat chicken and rice and broccoli all the time and you eat the list of foods that pops up when you search what foods are good to diet on. Like
mm,
you'll make progress. Those foods are those foods for a reason, but um, there's more sort of emotional satisfaction with being able to still go out and do those things, to have chips if you decide you want to, and then just plan for it the next day or the rest of that day. It kind of helps the progress and helps you stay a little bit sane if
yeah.
there's more than just, did I get the right amount of calories?
And I feel like coming off the cut too, because like, when you're on a cut, you're like, okay, it's 12 weeks or 10 weeks or
Mhm.
8 weeks, however long it is. You're like, okay, I'm nearing the end. I'm nearing the end. Like that's typically what you think would happen is like, oh, I have one more week left. I have 2 more weeks left.
Right.
I mean, at some point I lost track of what week it was because I was still allowing myself to kind of enjoy life. Right.
Hmm.
So, and then like coming back off the cut, I think it's helpful too, because if you're only eating chicken and rice and broccoli and like, all the boring stuff for those 12 weeks, you're right. You are going to make the progress and that's great. But then coming off the cut, it was kind of essentially like a way of binge eating where you're like, I want to eat all the things I used to eat. And then you're just going to eat all of those calories and gain it all back. So
Right.
like we went to last night, I got a cheeseburger and a 4-piece nugget. And I know
Mhm.
that that was 500 calories and I allocated for that ahead of time. And I'm not even on the cut anymore. But it's just
Right.
like, have that knowledge ahead of time, be like, oh, I can still enjoy these things, right?
Mhm.
Whether I'm on the cut or not. And that's kind of what I'm hoping is going to help sustain the like weight loss as the year like progresses.
Right. Yeah, you're setting me up for the segues here pretty well. But one of the things you were concerned with before we even started the cut initially was that it would be difficult to maintain that goal weight. Like it was a little daunting to say we're going to lose this much weight. And in the past, I think it was tough to get there and stay there. Um, but we just talked, I guess, earlier this week, and you were saying how nervous you were. You just went on vacation, you came back, and you're like, I don't want to weigh myself because it's going to be up
Mm-hmm.
here, and then I'm going to have to figure out what to do. And it was the exact same weight that it was on your
Yep.
last day of the cut.
Yeah. Yeah.
So can you get into or explain how the program mindset shifts that we just talked about enabled you to maintain that
Yeah.
for the past couple weeks, I guess, or the past week?
Yeah. So, I think like going off like in the past when I would try and do like the fat loss phase myself, or when, I was eating 800 calories a day or whatever, it was again that very highly restrictive environment. So after I was done and I reached that goal weight, then I would go back and like, okay, so now I can enjoy myself. I can eat all these things and I can whatever. And then of course, naturally I would gain the weight back. Right. So
Mhm.
that was my biggest worry going into this cut is, okay, if I work hard during this 12-week cut, I don't want to gain it all back like I have done in the past, right? The
Yeah.
kind of that ping of weight back and forth. And similar to what you were saying, after the first week of being off the cut, I didn't go crazy.
Mhm.
I allowed myself a few drinks. I allowed myself some desserts that I wasn't necessarily tracking anymore in my app because I am no longer on the cut, so I don't have to track.
Mhm.
But mentally, while I'm eating these things, I'm like, okay, you know what? This is probably in this realm of calories. And if I'm having this, then maybe I just won't have that extra drink later. Or like, oh, let me look at this menu choice between these two menu choices. Both of these sound very delicious. This one's more veggie heavy. I think that would really be tasty. And I think that might be better calories than the other one. But they're
Mhm.
both really tasty. Or I split it with my sister. My sister gets something delicious, and I say, hey, can I have a bite of that? And I realized just how much one bite of something that I want satisfies my cravings enough to the point where I actually don't need to eat the whole meal. I
Mhm.
just needed to have that flavor or that taste in my mouth. So just having one bite of food, and that's of course a lot less calories than the whole plate of food, but
Yeah.
having a bite or two that satisfies that craving without, sacrificing all those calories for it. So that's kind of how that week went after that cut. And I was worried. I was like, you know what? I wasn't tracking specific numbers. I was doing all the mind shifts, like, mentally, I was like
Mhm.
tracking and kind of saying, okay, I think this is right. But you never know because, it's not quantifiable. You're like, okay, maybe I like, gained all this weight. And again, like there was no other body changes or anything, but
Mhm.
I stepped on that scale and I weighed myself like 4 times because I was like, there's no way that I'm the exact same weight, but every time, under the four
Mhm.
times, I really was the same weight. And that's just because I think I did that mental mindset of being like, okay, like, I'm just going to do a bite or two of her plate, or we're going to share this dessert,
Mhm.
or, I'm going to, I really want this ice cream today. So I'm going to maybe eat less, of a cheese sandwich earlier in the day or something,
Mhm.
So it's just cool to kind of trust yourself, I guess, because
Mhm.
I thought I knew what I was doing, right? And seeing on a quantifiable standpoint that you're right, I was doing it right. I was like thinking about it correctly. It helps ease me coming off of the cut because now I know even if I'm not tracking everything via the app, I know that I'm mentally doing the right preparations and thought processes to where I know I'm not going to be overeating,
Mhm.
right? So, and I think that honestly was the biggest key with the 12-week cut is that it taught me how to do that, right?
Yeah.
Like through like, I know certain calorie amounts of things I can kind of guesstimate or I can look online, but it's kind of, bartering with the calories throughout the day and kind of, yeah, I don't know. That's just been the most useful part, I think, of the cut. And knowing that I can do it mentally without having to rely on an app is really beneficial because, the app, it's temporary. I'm not going to be
Right.
using it for everything for the rest of my life.
Right.
But these mental shifts are going to help me for the rest of my life, which is awesome. So,
Yeah. Yeah. It's a tool to help you get to where you want to go.
mhm.
And like you said, you're kind of learning during the cut. It's not just eat these foods. You're kind of learning um, how to actually do that in different situations and how to pivot. And then you check your work each week basically with the objective weight or, you guess, let's say, and then you put it in the app and you're like, oh, I was kind of close.
Mhm.
So understanding how to do that and learning how to do that gives you the freedom to then after go on vacation and kind of eyeball things and be mindful and be like, oh, okay, I can have this. Maybe I don't need this much and
Mhm.
still maintain the progress that you had. So that's pretty cool.
And I think it's important too, because something that we touched upon in the past too, like back in college, I would weigh myself every day, right?
Mhm.
Like every day at the same time, I would weigh myself, and any little change would freak me out or make me super happy, right?
Mhm.
So I think looking at it from like a weekly standpoint, like we talked about in the past, is like day to day is not as, quantifiable as like the whole week, right? And
Right.
it's because you're doing so much throughout the week. So even like on the days where like my birthday was last week, so I decided, you know what, I'm gonna work out on the day of my birthday so that I can enjoy an extra slice of cake later, right? It's
Mhm.
kind of like the input output mindset as well. It's like if you're planning for these things like these parties, going to the bar with your friends or whatever. Those days, if you're expecting to maybe eat, a little bit more than the calorie amount that you're anticipating, then maybe just working a little harder in the gym or making that day a gym day so you can burn a little bit more. It's kind of like bartering like the
Mhm.
input output of calories as well, I think is
Yeah.
important. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. The mindset shifts just give you that freedom to kind of live your life and then kind of have this run on autopilot in the background, which is
Mhm.
great.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so yeah, last question then. What would you say to anyone who's been considering hiring a coach or joining a program that's not like a PDF or an app?
Do it. That's what I would say. I would say do it. Because again, it's that personalized factor where you're going to have a motivator, you're going to have a listener, you're going to have somebody who knows you and your body and the type of day you had. There's sometimes where I'm like, listen, I've had a shit day. I don't know if I can get in all the workouts this week. And then the way that you not only switch around the workouts, but then also ease my mind saying it's okay,
Mhm.
nobody's perfect, it's all right, like like having like your own personal cheerleader and somebody who is very knowledgeable on all of the things, whether it's nutrition or working out, form or whatever, like all the
Right.
form checks that we do. That's not something you can get from a PDF or a fitness influencer from an app. Health is wealth, right? So, of
Mhm.
course, you're going to be like, yeah, I'm going to pay the $20 monthly fee for an app, but that's what you're going to get. You're
Mhm.
paying for quality. So if you really are focused on improving your health, then you have to expect to pay a little bit for that because the higher that something costs, the more quality that you're going to get out of it.
Mhm.
And when it comes to your health, I think health is wealth, and that's something that it should be a priority for anybody. So yeah, spending the money on that, I think, makes it totally worth it. It's your life, it's your body, it's how you live. So I don't know. That's just my personal take. So
That was great. I don't think I could do a much better sales pitch than that. That was good.
also,
Um,
wedding website plug.
there you go.
Plug ZP training. Get the merch. Get the hats. Even though I never got a hat, but it's fun.
I ran out of hats. I don't even think,
Fine.
yeah, I got to do a restock of those. Um, but yeah, I think the coaching aspect is usually the difference maker between a lot of those things. And just kind of having someone in your corner who's at least just reaffirming some of the things you're thinking or talking about is super useful.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, that's all I got.
Wait,
Um,
of
I appreciate you taking the time to do this
course.
today.
Happy to
Um,
do it.
yeah,
Yeah.
always.